Hello, dear gardening friends. It's me, Peter, popping in to welcome you to the new and improved incarnation of the podcast you all know and love. Now, before anyone panics and starts clutching their trowels, yes, the podcast has a new name. From this day forward, you'll be listening to Super Cool Plants. I know, very modern, very flashy. Quite a departure from my usual stiff upper lip British branding instincts, but I must admit, I'm rather excited about the new format. Each episode will now feature two horticultural experts from somewhere across North America. Imagine a sort of botanical cage match, but with more Latin names and significantly fewer folding chairs. They'll be making the case for their favourite plants, defending their picks with passion, expertise, and possibly the occasional bit of plant geekery. Keeping the whole affair from descending into total horticultural chaos will be your trusted moderators, Carol Collins and Daniel Sherry, who will guide the conversation, ask the tough questions, and politely remind everyone that not every plant can be described as absolutely brilliant. And before anyone asks, no, you're not quite rid of good old Peter the Englishman. Not a chance. I'll still be popping up from time to time with a bit of garden news, a cheeky observation, or perhaps even a guest appearance when the topic turns to something truly important, like the finest English roses fit for a king, a subject on which I have, unsurprisingly, very strong opinions. Okay, here's the important bit. If you're looking for us, you'll now find this award-winning podcast under the name Super Cool Plants, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the usual digital haunts. And if you happen to prefer watching your podcasts, because apparently that's a thing now, you'll also find Super Cool Plants on its very own YouTube channel, separate from the main Fine Gardening channel. Very posh, and practically a royal residence. So grab a cup of tea, or something stronger if your garden has been particularly rebellious lately, and get ready for lively debates, brilliant plants, and plenty of gardening enthusiasm. This is Peter, welcoming you to Super Cool Plants. Now let's get growing.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Super Cool Plants, the Fine Gardening Podcast. I'm your host, Carol Collins. I'm the editor-in-chief at Fine Gardening. And as Peter mentioned in the ad before this started, we are relaunching the podcast with a new name and a new look. Super Cool Plants will even have its own YouTube channel, so be sure to follow us there or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. Today we are joined by two horticultural experts from two very different regions of the country to talk about underappreciated native plants. So I'm just going to go from East Coast to West, and Melissa Starkey is the Marketing and Communications Manager and an instructor at Mount Cuba Center in Delaware. Welcome to the podcast, Melissa.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And could you please tell our listeners a little bit about Mount Cuba Center and your, what the growing region is like in your part of the country?
Sure. So Mount Cuba Center is a botanical garden that focuses on native plants. So our mission is to inspire an appreciation in the value and beauty of native plants and a commitment to protect the habitats that sustain them. So we are the Mid-Atlantic's native plant botanic garden, and it's a really fantastic time to be here right now with the spring ephemerals in full bloom. It's pretty incredible. So Delaware is a pretty cool place to be because we're sort of at the border of the upper limit of the southern plants and the southern limit of the northern plants. So there's a lot of interesting plants that are native to the state. We're in northern Delaware, which is the Piedmont region, so very different from the rest of the state, which is all coastal plain and sandy. This is more like where I'm from in Pennsylvania, nice rolling hills, lots of clay soil. We're on the cusp of 7A and 7B here, and it's a great season to be here in spring. We get lots of rain, we get all four seasons, and spring and fall are never long enough.
Yes. Same here. And joining us from Texas is Amy Medley Galloway. She is lead horticulturist at Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center at the University of Texas in Austin. Welcome, Amy, and could you tell us a little bit about what it's like where you are?
Yes. So we are also a botanical garden that focuses on native plants, Texas native plants. And we are very hot and dry. So we have very rocky soils. And so our plants get long periods of drought, which is really difficult for them. So we have some very tough plants that can handle that. But we are zone 9A, and we have, we are well on our way into spring. Like, we've had many days where I've actually been swimming already. It's pretty hot.
A little jealous, but I bet the summers I would not be jealous of.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So the topic that brought you both here today is underappreciated native plants. And, I think there's kind of a movement, if you will, that your average gardeners are really getting more and more interested in native plants. But there's sort of a handful of, I guess, a lot of Midwest natives that are very well known and grown, but there are a lot of really cool native plants that are just underappreciated, maybe not as widely available. And so that's what we thought we would talk with you about today. So let's start with you, Melissa. What was, when you heard underappreciated native plants, what was the first one that came to mind for you?
The first one was actually a plant that's very close to my heart. It's wild bleeding heart, Dicentra eximia. This is a plant that I love. The second thing that came to mind is, oh my gosh, there are so many. How am I going to pick just 4? I had a long list, and then I kind of crowdsourced with some of the hort staff here and Sam from the trial garden, and like, help me narrow this down because there are just so many. But I will say everybody was really gung-ho about this plant in particular as well. So it's the best bleeding heart, I would say. It is, it's a great alternative to the non-native bleeding hearts, and it doesn't go dormant like they do. So it's a plant that I grew up with. It's actually a critically imperiled plant in Pennsylvania, but there's a really healthy population in the area of the state where I'm from. So before I knew anything about native plants or much about plants at all, this is just a plant that I grew to love, and then now appreciate how special it is in the wild. It produces these really pretty pink heart-shaped flowers that look like bleeding hearts. And then when in bud, which is the state that it's in right now, there's really this beautiful, dark, bright pink color. So it has really pretty fern-like foliage, which has kind of a bluish tinge. And the cool thing about this plant is that it really blooms all year long. So it puts its best flush out in the spring, but I have pictures from here at Mount Cuba of it blooming in November. Maybe a handful of blooms, but it's a worker. It is a fantastic plant. It's really adaptable. It's a great woodland plant. It can grow in part shade. It does great out in the sun. Where it's growing naturally is on kind of rocky, sunny outcrops. I see it going hiking in this area, growing out of rocks, literally. So it's very, very adaptable. And it gets cool. About 1 to 1.5 feet wide and tall. It's fantastic.
Very cool. And the regular bleeding hearts, garden variety bleeding hearts, those are not native. Am I correct in that? Those are...
That's correct.
Yeah.
So Dicentra spectabilis is one that's commonly used, and it's a bit bigger. The flowers are a bit bigger, but it goes dormant. I've grown it in my Philly garden when I was living in Philadelphia, and it would be great and then just disappear. Whereas the wild bleeding heart, Dicentra eximia, just keeps going. It starts and never really stops, and it doesn't fade out. There's a white cultivar available called Alba, but if you're growing hearts, then I think pink is a great color for them. But really, really great great plant. It's pollinated by bumblebees, like the closed bottle gentian. So it's really, you have to have a pollinator that's big enough and strong enough to actually force themselves through these tight petals.
Oh, but that is so cool. I had no idea that we had a native bleeding heart. Excellent. Wow. Okay, great start. Amy, how about you? When you first heard underappreciated native plants, what was the one that you first thought of?
I first thought of frostweed, which is Verbicina virginica. I think there's a, I believe, misconception that, well, first of all, in the name, weed is there. So I think that people see it as kind of like a woodland plant that should be in the wild and doesn't belong in cultivated gardens, but I very much disagree. I have it in one of my beds where it is kind of a back border to Prairie goldenrod and liatris. And it gets really tall, about 6 feet tall. You can kind of control that height by cutting the plants down when they're coming back from spring. And they'll go to kind of a shorter, maybe 4 feet high. But I like to maximize and capitalize on that height. And they stand at the back. They bloom this beautiful white color. They have a very like structural, very beautiful kind of whimsical form. And so it looks really nice behind the purple flowers and the yellow goldenrod. But pollinators absolutely adore these plants, especially when it's in the sun. So typically in the wild, you'll find it underneath large shade trees. It is very drought tolerant. As I said, we have very long periods of drought. And so it survives the best under deep shade in the wild, but in a cultivated garden that's getting water, it can grow in the full sun, which is pretty amazing. And it has really big, interesting leaves. The stems are winged. So they have like kind of wings along the stem, which is a really good way to identify the plant. But like I said, covered in pollinators, and then I leave it standing through the winter, and it keeps that really interesting structural form throughout the whole winter into spring. Actually, right now, mine are still standing kind of like a dried bouquet kind of looking. And then the birds that eat, the granivorous birds, the ones that eat grain, love to eat the seeds. So it's a very great plant for cultivated gardens, but I also think gives so much to pollinators and wildlife. And then again, like those stems that are so big, a lot of our bees and stem nesting insects will make little nests in there as well.
Is this the plant that pushes out the frost out of its stems?
Yes.
Does it get cold enough for you for it to do that?
It does. Yeah. Our first freeze, it's the first thing I do, run out in my backyard or in the garden to go see. And it's like the ice, it's almost like cotton candy sheets of ice that it's very, very fun. Very beautiful.
It's magical. Yeah.
It's really
they're
magical.
So beautiful. It's my favorite thing to do here too. The first really cold morning, I get here very early. I go out to the meadow and I look for frost flowers, and every time you see them, they're different. They're gorgeous.
Do you have them at Mount Cuba too, Melissa?
We do, yes. And we have a few species that produce the frost flowers, but Dittany is one that we have quite a bit of, and it's amazing.
I've heard that I have not timed it correctly yet, but I've heard that if you can time it perfectly where you prune the top of the plant right before the freeze, that then it'll have kind of like ice spirals coming out of the top. So that's one of my goals to try.
Yeah, at least one stem just to see it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we have gotten off to a great start. Melissa, what is your next plant that you'd like?
So my next plant is Jacob's Ladder, Polemonium reptans. And the reason this came to mind is because it is an awesome spring plant, and it is blooming right now with these beautiful little bluish flowers. Blue is such a rare color to see in nature, particularly in plants. So it's a wonderful plant because of that as well. You don't really get to see too many blue flowers. Spring is kind of the time to do it. It attracts and supports early season pollinators. So it's one of the early bloomers, but unlike a lot of its companion plants, it's not a spring ephemeral, as in it doesn't actually disappear, come hot weather, come June. So it's got really attractive foliage. So even when it's finished blooming, it's a really pretty plant. It's called Jacob's ladder because the foliage sort of looks like a ladder. It's pinnately compound, so the leaves are kind of across from each other. It's also partly evergreen, so you kind of always know where it is in the garden, and it's something to at least see in the winter to figure out where it is. And sometimes, like when it's really happy, it can be almost like a little round bush of happiness in the spring. It is just a lovely plant. It's one of my favorite spring plants. You can grow it in part shade or even full shade. It definitely does better, I think, in part shade. It likes to have a little bit of sun. It definitely blooms better. And it's another plant that's great for containers. So I tried to choose all plants that you can grow in containers to give people more flexibility. So it looks great in containers paired with something like Tiarella or some heucheras. It's also really easy to care for. I have it growing in all over my garden in all different places, even in some places that maybe it shouldn't be. I have it in full sun somewhere, and it's actually looks gorgeous right now, even though it is, a woodland plant, really likes the part shade. It's also a great plant to divide when it gets big enough in a couple, 2-3 years. And it does like well-drained soil, average to moist is best. And it covers a wide zone range. So it can grow from zones 3 to 8. So a lot of folks can grow it. One of the super cool things about it is that it's a host for a tiny specialist bee. So a lot of people, if you think about pollinator interactions or specialized pollinator interactions, you think of maybe monarchs. They can only eat milkweed, so people think of the caterpillars. But there are actually bees that can only collect pollen from very, very specific plants. And this little tiny, it's called Jacob's ladder mining bee, is one of them. So it only collects plants from Jacob's ladder to feed its young. And we did a bee report here at Mount Cuba Center and found a population of these bees here on the property, whereas the nearest population of the bees that's been reported was something like over 300 miles away. So it's kind of the true plant it and they will come. Clearly, there must be some other populations that just haven't been reported in between, but it's a great plant for its beauty, for supporting this awesome little bee, and for having this evergreen foliage. Yeah. It's also deer resistant, but nothing is truly deer resistant probably. So
it's
I hesitate to say that.
I grew that when I was in Vermont, so that's how I know that it's hardy of zone 3. Very cool. Amy, what is your second plant?
My second plant is Agarita, Mahonia trifoliata. This plant, I feel like people don't use enough. It is also a very, very early spring bloomer, and kind of similar to the Jacob's ladder in that it, not similar at all, but similar in that it is always there. It holds its structure. It's actually evergreen. It has these trifoliate holly-like flower or leaves, so kind of spiky, very pretty. They're very dark green. Sometimes they can be kind of like a bluish color. It's very beautiful, and it stays a very nice mid-sized shrub, about 4 to 5 feet tall, and I don't actually have to do any maintenance on it, which is really nice because those leaves are very sharp. But, early spring, it is covered in these very beautiful small yellow flowers that if you pass by, it absolutely, the fragrance is like so amazing. It smells like honey. And so it's providing nectar and pollen really, really early in the season, which is really important for pollinators. And then after the flowers comes the berries, and there are these really beautiful red berries that humans make jam from, and I've heard wine as well. I've heard that, you don't want to be in there picking the berries, but I've heard if you just put like a sheet underneath and kind of gently with a broom or something hit the plant, all of the berries fall so that you don't have to get in there and get poked. But those berries are also highly prized by birds and wildlife as well. And that spiky foliage creates cover for our birds and small mammals that are trying to get some shelter. So it's a really great evergreen shrub that can handle anything and grow in like any soils. And I feel like people should be using it a lot more. One interesting thing about it is that the wood and the roots are bright yellow. And the wood and the roots are actually antimicrobial and antiviral. So I've heard, I went to a ethnobotany talk, and some old ranchers were talking about how when they were, back in the day when they would play football and they got like athlete's foot, their mom would take the Agarita wood and put it in water and have them soak their feet in it, which is really interesting. So a really great medicinal plant as well.
Wow, fantastic. I wanted to remind our listeners, the same as with the previous podcast, that we will have photos of all of these plants in the show notes. And our producer, Jack, cuts the photos into the YouTube version, which is a reason in itself to watch the YouTube version. Like and follow the channel. It's the all new channel for Super Cool Plants. Hey podcast listeners, I am sure you've heard us talking about our trip to the Netherlands, which will be from September 4th to September 12th in 2026. We will be exploring gardens in Amsterdam and Rotterdam with our friend Annie Guilfoyle as our guide. Danielle and I will both be there, and we hope that you can join us. The tour is filling fast. We are keeping it limited to a small group. So if you are interested in joining us for the Netherlands tour, you can go to finegardening.com, look for the garden travel tab, and if you're really interested, we have recorded a webinar with Annie Guilfoyle with frequently asked questions. It's sort of Q&A format, and you can learn everything you want to know about what the trip's going to be like, what to expect, what to pack. Do you need to learn Dutch? Spoiler, you do not need to learn Dutch. Everybody, the tours will all be in English, and you will find that the Netherlands are very, very tourist friendly. People from all over the world visit, but they do not get to see the cool gardens that we will be visiting. These are private gardens designed by world-class Dutch designers. You're going to get to meet some of the designers, and we'll also be visiting some very significant historic gardens that really changed the course of ornamental horticulture. So don't miss out. We hope you can join us September 4th through September 12th in the Netherlands. I look forward to it and see you there. Well, alrighty, I think we're at the halfway point here. What do you have next for us, Melissa?
I have coral honeysuckle, Bladiscera sempervirens. This is another one, when I mentioned it to my colleagues, that everybody jumped on. This is an awesome, beautiful vine. It has gorgeous flowers. It's so showy when it's in full bloom. This is another one, like the wild bleeding heart, that will bloom for you from spring through fall. So again, it'll really probably put in its best flush of full blooms in the spring, but it keeps going all through the fall. And one of the best things about this, there's so many best things about this, so it's hard to narrow it down, but one of the best things is that it's a hummingbird magnet. So the bloom time of the trumpet honeysuckle corresponds to when the hummingbirds are back in our area. And it's the typical red tubular flowers that are associated with what hummingbirds like, and loads of nectar. This is another one that you can grow in a pot, you can grow it in the ground, it's very, very adaptable. And I have it growing in a pot up my banister, up my back steps. And hummingbirds actually visit it, even with the cat sitting out at the back glass door watching from the other side. They love this plant. So plant it and you'll definitely get hummingbirds. It is a twining vine, so you do need to kind of help it along to train it. It doesn't, put out tendrils or anything to climb, but it looks fantastic on the banister. I have it growing on a trellis as well. At Mount Cuba, we actually have it growing on a fence where it's just this giant cluster of, and when it's in bloom, it is fantastic. It's this just red ball of flowers. Again, we have it in containers and we see hummingbirds coming to the containers. It's great. It's also a host plant for the hummingbird clearwing moth and the snowberry clearwing moth. Very, very cool hummingbird-esque moths. They're quite large. They're really charismatic and really neat to watch. As well as the spring azure butterfly, which is what we're seeing kind of flitting around, the little blue butterfly flitting around right now. The plant is semi-evergreen, so in warmer climates, mine hung on to its, a handful of leaves here and there throughout the winter, and then it just flushes out. It's now greening up right now. It's, again, very adaptable, easy to grow, and there's a few cultivars that are available for it. So Major Wheeler is one of them that just produces a lot of red blooms, and there's actually a yellow cultivar as well called John Clayton. This is another one that can grow a bunch of different places. It's native to the southeast, actually, but it can grow all the way from zones 4 to 9. Another, as far as adaptability, it can grow in full sun. That's where you'll get the best flowers, but it's fine in part shade. The one on my banister is in more shade than it probably would like to be in, and it still flowers. It still attracts the hummingbirds. Cat or no cat at the window or door, doesn't matter. Then it produces some little red berries that the birds will also eat pretty quickly. So wonderful, wonderful plant for supports so much biodiversity, and it's just absolutely gorgeous.
Such a cool plant. And Amy, I believe that when we were discussing plant lists, this was maybe one of it would have been on your list maybe.
Yes. Yeah, one of my favorites. Such a beautiful plant, and the snowberry clearwing is like my favorite pollinator. It's so cool.
Yeah. This is on my wish list, and I think the idea of growing it on a fence is great because I have fence and I haven't bought it because I didn't have a trellis to put it on, but I should just grow it on my fence already. I think I've made my decision.
You will be rewarded for sure with lots of cool things coming to it.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. What do you have for us, Amy? I don't know if you can top that one, but all of these plants are so cool.
I know. Like Melissa, I had a very, very long list that I had to narrow down. So one of my favorites right now is Heartleaf skullcap, Scutellaria ovata. And what I love about it is that some people say that it's a little aggressive, but I really find that it kind of will find a spot that nothing else is growing, and it's like, here's my little place, and then here's my little place, and it just kind of goes through the garden that way. I don't find that it's crowding anything else out, but I really love the very, very fuzzy leaves. So the heart-shaped leaves that are kind of like blue, very fuzzy. They have an oil gland also that the oil gland with the fuzziness is supposed to make it pretty deer resistant. Again, as we've already covered, nothing is fully deer resistant, but I found that they kind of avoid this plant. It also looks really good if you plant it in mass in like a perennial border. And then it has really beautiful flower spikes that are similar to like a salvia, even though it is not a salvia. But it has these kind of blue, purple flowers that are really beautiful that hummingbirds will visit. And I feel like it also goes dormant in the summertime, which also gives, time for other things to shine. So I feel like it's a really nice plant that fills a space that we have trouble filling, which is dry shade. In Central Texas, we have most of our native plants are like, give me sun, give me like the scorching, blasting sun. And this plant can be in dry shade. And something that blooms in dry shade is really awesome.
Yes. And when we have like dry shade articles as cover lines, like that is what people want to know, because it's a hard kind of plant to find. Mm-hmm. Very cool. Yeah, I always think of Scutellaria as like a southern plains type of plant, but I imagine we could probably grow it back here in the East Coast as long as
I think it's zones 4 through 9.
Yeah.
So
yeah, very cool. All right, we're coming down to the end of it. Everyone has one last plant. So what is your final one, Melissa?
All right, we're moving into fall for this one. I tried to cover spring, summer, and fall. So really, I want to say goldenrod in general. Goldenrods are amazing plants. They get an unfortunate bad rap. People sometimes associate them with allergies. What they really mean is ragweed. They bloom around the same time, but goldenrod does not cause allergies. You really have to sniff it very hard to get the pollen. It's sticky because it's pollinated by insects. And they're not all as aggressive as people may think. They're amazing plants that support biodiversity. It's a keystone plant, so it's the host plant in our area for over 120 different moths and butterfly caterpillars. The seeds feed the birds and other animals, so they're amazing plants. And I know I can't just say goldenrod in general, so I did pick Fireworks wrinkle leaf goldenrod, Solidago rugosa fireworks, which is a plant that it's the gateway, I think, to goldenrods. It is a plant that anyone can use in their garden. It can be used in very formal settings. We have it in our very formal round garden here at Mount Cuba Center. And it's just gorgeous. We also did a recent trial report where we evaluated different goldenrods side by side. And Solidago rugosa fireworks was actually the winner. So it's got a lot of horticultural value. It's got a lot of value for pollinators. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful plant. When this is blooming in the fall, fireworks is really an appropriate name because they're just these spires of this beautiful, bright, bright yellow flowers. You combine this with purple asters and it's just this winning combination. So pollinators are happy, people are happy. You can grow it in a pot too. I actually moved some to a pot last year, wondering how it would do just fine. It's great. It's a taller plant, so it can grow 3 to 3.5 feet tall and about 2 to 3 feet wide. It does great. It likes full sun. Again, I have it, I cheat as much as possible with some of the plants that I really like, and I have it in part shade and it still looks beautiful. If you grow it in moister soils, it may spread a little bit, but it's not something that's difficult to control, and you can just move it to containers. If you grow it in a drier area, I have some at my mom's house in a drier slope, a rocky slope. It does not spread there, but it still puts on this beautiful fall display. So this is another plant that's, again, supposedly deer resistant and covers kind of a wide growing area of zones 4 to 8, but absolutely beautiful. I'd say get started planting fireworks goldenrod and then use that as your gateway to other goldenrods. There are just so many that are so beautiful and interesting and support so much biodiversity.
If there are listeners out there who are nervous because they've had run-ins with canadensis, which spreads kind of a lot more, this doesn't spread quite as aggressively as that, correct?
No, and sometimes I wish it spread more. Some of the goldenrods, like this one, also golden fleece goldenrod, I want more of them. I want them to just kind of go bananas and start spreading. So that's definitely not a worry.
No, I didn't think so. And like you said, it's something you want more of, and the pollinators and the other creatures that depend on it would want more. So
exactly. And your friends.
Very cool. All right, Amy, what is your final crowning glory plant?
My final plant is one of my favorites. It's a little tiny, tiny plant, Prairie fleabane. It's a Rigeron modestus. So it starts as like a little small plant with really cute foliage. The foliage feels very like cartoon-like to me, the basal foliage. And then as it trails, it has a little bit of a finer foliage. But the real thing that is the sweet thing about it is that it has these little buds that are pinkish on the outside, and then they open to bright white daisies that are tiny. And they have a yellow center, very cheery and like very easy to pair with any other color. They look great in a mass. They grow really well in rock gardens. And they also look really great amongst other wildflowers. But it's just such a nice plant that it will seed itself and just kind of like fill in. But again, it's little. It feels like a little fairy plant to me. And we at the Wildflower Center have partnered with the Xerces Society. And so on our database, they go through and tell us which some facts about each plant sometimes. So it may say this plant has special value to native bees. But this plant says, they told us that it supports the biological conservation insects. So it actually supports the predatory insects that will prey on your garden pests. So not only is it cute, it's supporting those really important predatory insects, but then also butterflies and bees really enjoy the flowers as well. And it has multiple flowers for each little small plant. So one of my favorites, really cute.
You know, you mentioned the predatory insects, and we're talking about underappreciated native plants, but I think the predatory insects are also underappreciated. Everybody's all about the pollinators and the butterflies, but you got to give the predators some love too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And they're usually beautiful too.
Yes.
Some of the wasps with the blue sheen, they're just gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. Well, what a fun episode this has been. I can't think of anything else to add except that for listeners, go to the show notes, check out the amazing photos. We will also drop links to the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center and Mount Cuba Center. Those two websites are fantastic. So many resources on both of those websites at Fine Gardening. We refer to those websites all the time for plant information, growing information. Thank you both, and thank you for being our first episodes on Super Cool Plants. Amy, do you have any final words for the folks?
Just check out which native plants you have in your area. They are going to do the best because they're adapted to your soil and to your climate. And they have really important relationships with pollinators that you may not even know.
Excellent. And Melissa, any final words from you?
I would say enjoy the spring, enjoy it while it lasts. If you're in an area where you have a lot of spring, the spring ephemerals are here and gone in an instant. And also that these 8 plants are just the beginning of native plants. So try starting with one of these and then keep going and plant them in pots. It doesn't matter how small your property is. If you live in the city, you can put native plants in a pot and you can still support biodiversity. So everyone can make a difference.
Absolutely. Thank you both. And happy growing to all of you. Life is too short for boring plants.